today. I was considering, I'm going to do work on 3 of my rain trees today. I was considering to wait a little while longer before I really did any work on these guys. But there's, first off, I just found out that they're scheduling my roof to be rebuilt here in the next few days. I'm going to have to move about 50% of my plants, and these are actually a couple of them that actually sit there right by the roof line, if you will. And they're going to be a little bit easier to move if I make them a little, if I just trim them down a little bit, because I'm going to have to move them out, move them back. But then also, this one actually sits in the middle of basically 3 other rain trees. It was getting attacked by aphids. I don't really talk about my pest control that much. I prefer not to use chemicals if I can get away with not using chemicals. But my method is I take and squish and kind of like run them off with the garden hose or whatever I can do. And if they stay persistent, eventually I'll use chemicals if I have to. Only on this one. And they weren't on the ones on either side of it, which are right next to it, which is really just kind of unbelievable. But as I was squishing them, I noticed that the growing tips out here were really weak. And then if you take a look right here, I might be able to show you closer up in a minute too, but if you take a look right here, they were weakened growing tips. And then we just had 3 nights. It was actually Christmas Eve, and the night after that, and the night after that, that the temperatures got down in the 30s for 3 nights in a row. Kind of almost gets this look like it burns the growing tip down. Doesn't damage the rest of the tree. I think that these are pretty safe down to about, now I know they've seen, up until this year, they'd seen as low as 39. Now I know they've seen as low as 37. The tree's fine, but definitely those weakened growing tips got hurt. I'll show you on the trees sitting on the other side of them where they actually didn't, that this was happening. I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy off right here. And if you look carefully here, it's one of the coolest things I actually think I find about the rain trees. This is the best explanation of what nodes are in a tree I can think of. That's a node, that's a node, that's a node. That's also how directional pruning works. If I was to have cut that off there, more than likely it would just continue a new branch out that way. If I was to cut it there, it would more than likely continue a branch out that way. Works like 90% of the time. But you can see where each node is actually getting a new branch coming out of it. And those would not just be leaves, those would actually be new branches. And I wanted to take, there's like 7 main branches of this tree right now, and it only had 3 of the longer growths coming out. So what I didn't want to happen, I didn't want each one of these to be exploding with growth while some of these other branches never really had any. And it is, and now I do see, and I saw this even before I worked on it, that some of these places where it wasn't getting any growth now have those growths as well. So I don't want all the energy going into these longer ones. I do want to keep the tree a little more compact. And there we go, a little bit of a closer look at it. Supposed to get kind of cold again next weekend, but it's only in the 40s. I think it'll be fine. All right, and then there's this guy here. This guy's actually a failed air layer that I had went to take off of the cascade that I had. The cascade that I had, this used to be the top. And when I was checking for roofs, probably being a little impatient, but I was checking and I never saw any. And so I was just like, well, this isn't going to work, and I took it off. And I just saw like a root or 2 coming out of there once I took all the sphagnum moss off and everything. And so I went ahead and I just threw it in a pot and just said, well, maybe this will live. I'll put it someplace where it'll get some water. And sure enough, it lived. Wound up with a bunch of sprouts down here. There's a little bit of deadwood here that I actually asked. There was a big piece of it that came up like this into a bunch of little more smaller ramified piece of it, if you will. But I actually asked on YouTube, I asked the audience, do you think I should take it off? Everybody thought I should take it off, so I took off like 90% of it. I actually left that little bit on there just so I could tie it in the spot a little bit better at the time that I decided to do that with it. But this one, right next to that other one, their canopies even touch a little bit, especially way up here with the longer one. Never had any aphids on it, and so therefore it never really had any cold damage. Still has the good growing tip there, still just growing strong. I have also noticed that there's some smaller branching in here that never really, gained the momentum with this, and so now there's some little buds in there, and so I figured, while I had the other one in here working on it, I'd go ahead and just trim this guy too. I do, when I go in here, I do try to find where the last chop was. Last chop was here, and I try to make it, I say last chop, the last pruning mark or whatever, last here and here. I don't know why it's so much lower on that one. I do try to make it to where I don't go down to the exact same spot. That would, some people call that hedging. I don't really call that hedging. I call that pollarding. That would be cutting at the same spot every time. I either want to let it grow some. So I usually try to come up like a node or two from the last cut. Or just, enough to make sure that it's not right at the same spot again. These grow so rapidly, as far as making it all uniform, isn't really that big of a deal. You just don't want to get in the habit of hitting that same spot each time. And that one. All right, that should give us something to work with here as we go into spring. There's that deadwood. And, like I said, that piece of deadwood that was voted on, I should cut it off, came out in here. Starting to even out quite a bit. I would like, my plan is I'm leaving this branch on here for now. I'm hoping that before there was a little piece of a stump. Oh, that was like right here. And then there was another branch coming right out at the base that I cut off. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have left that for a little while longer just to kind of fatten it up a little bit. Now this is even in a little bit of a better spot for me to prune eventually. So, and it's also on the same side with that deadwood, so I'm hoping that this will help fatten that one piece up there, and then it'll get big enough to where it'll either reject that last little bit of deadwood or just kind of overwhelm it and you won't even be able to see it there anymore. Now the next tree I'm going to get is actually, if you go back and watch some previous videos, you can see where I took it from. But it's actually in a repot. I took and broke it off of this part of the stump right here and repotted it in this small pot that I got this other little guy in. Let's go get that guy and take a look. All right, and then there's this guy here. This is the side of the stump that I pulled it off that mother tree from. Going to have nabari problems on this one eventually, but I can already see I got a root going off that way. I'm going to go ahead, after I trim it today, I'm going to go ahead and repot it. This was, I did say most of my trees did fine through the storm, and they did. But I had to do 20, 30 emergency repots that day. And this one, it was still super windy that day. I was picking everything up, and it kept flopping back out and flopping back out. And so what I wound up having to do was just tie the whole root ball in around the pot here. And since one of the reasons why I did it, something so small like that is, when I chopped it off, I wasn't even sure. I took my root splitter and kind of broke it off the stump of that larger one, and I wasn't even sure it was going to survive. And sometimes, you put it in too big of a pot, it's hard to gauge how much water to give it, things like that. So I just put it in here until it survived. And if it wasn't for the hurricane, which just really did derail so many of the plans I had for so many things I was going to do, not even just tree related and everything. Since that did happen, I didn't get a chance to repot it before the end of the summer. It's now basically my spring. Nothing invested in this tree, so I'll just go ahead and pretty much slip pot it. I don't think it'll hurt a thing. You can see where I had chopped this guy. I found this one right here, and then this one was right around the same height. This branch got no growth off of it. This one wound up getting two off of it. I'm not going to cut it quite as, in the other ones I was going down to only 1 or 2 nodes above the last chop. This one I'm going to go a good 3 or 4 above. Leave plenty of room for dieback. These two, since this actually went into 2 different branches here, I'm just going to try to use directional pruning and keep them going away from each other there anyway. And then this one I just kind of want to shoot for about the same height. And I got the other side there. Alright, so I got a bigger training pot. I got some tie downs ready to go. I think it was normal springtime coming and I didn't have roofers, and I don't know what you're going to call the lanai crew, maybe the sheet metal crew or something like that. But if for any reason, especially if the sheet metal crew and the roofers are here at the same time, I may have to move this even more than I really wanted to. So it'll be best if it's tied in. Because it's only been in here, I forgot to look and see exactly when it was I did that. It was towards the later part of the summertime when I took and split this off that bigger tree. But since I might have to move it more than I thought, I'm just going to go ahead and tie it down. I may have to tie it down to the tree itself, but we'll just see how that goes. And you know, it's amazing, I just got a good look at what this root ball even looked like when I had to do the emergency repot, and I really don't remember. Substrate is still good, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it in here so when I pull it out, anything that spills out I can just reuse. Alright, now I know I said slip pot, but I do want to get a look at what I got here. Rain trees have their way of finding the bottom of the pot, and then all the roots just kind of gather right there in one spot. I do want to eliminate some of the longer ones and see if I can spread it out just a little bit from what it was. Yeah, that longer side there, I don't want that crowding in there in any kind of way. Those would be okay, but since I'm here, so not quite a slip pot, but I wasn't too rough with it. Just spread them out just a little bit. Really still hasn't been all that long since it's been separated from its mother. Let's see, I should be able to tie. All right, and there with it tied in there like that and everything, that should, if some well-meaning worker just wants to pick it up and move it and they set it down rough or anything like that, that'll help that out a lot too. So hopefully I can just keep it out of their way, but we'll see what happens. There's that side I was worried about. There are a couple of roots coming out that way. Hopefully it'll kind of grow and maybe cover itself up over time, get thick enough there where it just kind of envelops that flat spot. We'll see what happens.